Hey everybody, Canadian Operator here, and today we're going to be continuing my safety series on how to prove a firearm safe. This is going to be a very essential thing that you will need to know, not just for general firearm safety, but also if you're looking to go through the Canadian Firearm Safety course for your non-restricted possession and acquisition license. You're going to need to know how to do this, not just in theory, but in practice as well, because you're going to be tested on this on a variety of different actions. So for me today, I'm going to be demonstrating the bolt action as well as the semi-automatic action. There are other actions. There's going to be, break action, your single shot. There's going to be lever action as well. That's a very popular one. There's even revolving action, believe it or not, for rifles. Even though it's incredibly rare, most people think revolving action is just for, as the name might imply, revolvers, which you would be looking at in your Canadian restricted firearm safety course. But that being said, it's important to get familiar with all of the different actions that you're going to be handling. Before we start, I just wanted to let you know that we're in a safe space here. There's nobody else in the room with me, and every direction that we're going to point the firearm in today will be a safe direction for me. However, that might not be the case for you, especially if you're taking your Canadian firearm safety course for your PAL. There's going to be designated prescribed areas in the room that your instructor will probably tape off, or at least just tell you, hey, that wall is the safe direction. So always, always, always make sure that when you are handling firearms, even though the ones in your course are going to be deactivated and there is absolutely no way that they can go off because their firing pins have been taken out and because you're using only snap caps or dummy ammunition. That being said, you still want to practice safe firearm etiquette, basically, as if you're handling a real firearm. And in fact, that's part of ACTS, right? Assume every firearm is loaded, control the muzzle direction, keep your finger off the trigger and out of the trigger guard, and see that the firearm is safe and prove it safe. So basically, we're going to start with a semi and a bolt action, and then there are going to be other actions available out there. You can practice. Usually when you're in your class, the instructor does give you time to practice. You can ask questions, and you can get to know the different firearms. Sometimes the firearms they use in these courses can be quite old, and so their actions are in function pretty much exactly the same as some of the ones we're talking about today, but sometimes the design is a little bit different. So you might want to talk to your instructor and just get things sorted out. Don't be shy to ask any questions, and if you happen to have any for me, do make sure to leave those down in the comments. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the semi-automatic rifle and proving it safe. All right, so for my semi-automatic rifle, we have a bit of a weird one here. This is my IWI Tavor X95. This one is chambered in 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO, and we do have a bullpup design. So as you can see, the action is going to be actually right here in the buttstock, in the mag well, just right there, with the charging handle on the left. So it's going to be a little bit different than your AR pattern magazines, or your AR pattern rifles rather, which again in Canada you're not going to see a whole lot, since our government seems to think that we are incapable of having them, even though they want us to keep it in our homes for 3 to 5 years plus while they figure out what to do. But I digress. If you're Canadian, you know what's up with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to prove this safe, and then we're going to move on to the bolt action. So prove, as I'm sure you know if you've seen my pistol video, and if you haven't, make sure to go watch that right there. First, we're going to point the firearm in the safest available direction. For me, that's going to be this way, sort of in that general direction. But again, do pay attention in your course, because your instructor may prescribe a specific direction for you to point your firearm, and pointing the firearm in a safe direction is absolutely paramount. If you can't do that, you'll probably not pass your course, or at least, you maybe even barely pass. I don't think you would actually pass for pointing the firearm in an unsafe direction. So just make sure that you're cognizant of that, okay? So what we're going to do first is we're going to point. The next step is going to be remove. So I don't have any dummy magazines or anything, or dummy rounds with me here, as I usually lock everything away when I have firearms out. Again, just for safety. It's a good practice. But as you can see, we don't have a magazine in here, but if we did, we would hit the magazine release, which on this particular firearm is just right here. Okay, and that would remove the magazine from there. And then at that point, we need to make sure that there are no other cartridges, or there's no other cartridge in the actual chamber itself, because it's very well possible if you pick up a firearm, especially if you're at a range, for example, you may have forgotten that there is one in the chamber and ready to be fired, and that still can happen even if you don't have a magazine inserted. So that's why it's important to grab your charging handle. Again, on this firearm, it's going to be right here. And this one's a bit weird because the bolt hold open is also just down here. We have to pull this down when the bolt is all the way back. It's not the most ergonomic thing on this rifle, and it's honestly the one thing that I kind of hate the most. But in any case, what you want to do is once you've removed your magazine, you want to cycle your action. In this case, we're going to pull that charging handle back and forward a few times. Okay, and the reason why you want to do that is because in the process of working that action, in the same way as if you were shooting, that bolt coming back is going to cause the extractor to try to grip the base of a cartridge or a casing that might be in there, and it'll spit it out. And so that is going to be the way that you're going to ensure that there's nothing in the chamber, but we're also going to observe, because that is the next step, is observe the chamber. So the chamber is just in here. So I'm going to look in there, and even though it is a little dark, I can see the chamber. I can see there's nothing in the chamber, and I can see that the ejection port is completely open. And then the next step is going to be verify the feeding path. And the reason that you want to do that, again, is you want to make sure that you don't have anything obstructing the feeding path where the magazine would feed cartridges into the action of the rifle. And in this case, as you can see, the feeding path is also clear. Once we've done that, the last step is to examine the bore. There's a couple things that you can do in this case, and the bore being the inside of your barrel. So you want to make sure that there's no obstructions or anything like that. This is also quite important if, maybe you're handling your firearm, so you don't need to do this for the sake of handling it once you've already picked it up and proven the firearm. But if you have a misfire, for example, or if you have a jam or some kind of other malfunction, observing or rather examining the bore is very important, because it helps you to determine whether there's obstructions in the barrel. Having an obstruction in the barrel can be exceedingly dangerous to you and your firearm, and potentially anybody that's beside you. And the reason for that is that if you do have an obstruction in the barrel where the bullet maybe the propellant didn't burn all the way, or there was some kind of sealing issue or something, and that cartridge or that bullet got stuck halfway down the barrel, if you don't do that check before you fire your next shot, you might be firing a bullet into the back of the bullet that's already stuck in there. That's going to cause a huge buildup of pressure in the barrel and the chamber, and that could have explosive consequences. Not always, but in most cases, you want to try to avoid anything that might happen, right? Again, for safety's sake, it's always good to be safe than sorry. So the best way that I found for examining the bore, there's two ways, and that depends on the length of the barrel and how comfortable you are basically with these steps. So what I like to do is I have a little pen light that I carry with me at all times, and what I'll do is I'll just kind of cup, because you can see we do have a little flash hider here, so some of that light might escape. So I'll cup that flash hider and I'll put the pen light right at the end. And then as I'm doing that, I'm going to look and I'm going to observe that chamber again. And if I see all of that light coming through, then it gives me a pretty good indication that there's no obstructions there, especially with a really thin barrel or a really thin width inside the barrel, like a 223 or a 5.56, which again, not much bigger than a 22 long rifle. Now that is a good way to do it, but it's not the best way to do it. In my opinion, if you do have a cleaning rod that's sufficiently long enough, that is the best absolute way to do it, especially if that cleaning rod is the same width or circumference on the outside as the inside of your bore. And the reason for that is if you stick that cleaning rod all the way down and you see it come out the other side inside your action here, and past the chamber, then 100% you don't have any obstructions there. And again, for the purposes of demonstrating that you know how to examine the bore as part of your examination, as part of your licensing and your test, that is the best possible way, because you're showing without a shadow of a doubt that one, you've done your due diligence, and two, there is absolutely nothing in that barrel inside of that bore, right? So that is basically it. Again, we'll just kind of close this and do this again. Point, remove, take out your magazine, and then also as a part of remove, we're going to rack that charging handle. Nothing's coming out. We're going to lock that bolt open. We're going to observe the chamber. We're going to verify the feeding path, and then we're going to examine the bore again with the light or the cleaning rod. And that's it. That's how to prove a semi-automatic firearm safe. Pretty easy and pretty straightforward. Now again, absolutely no ammunition. I'm just gonna decock it here just by pulling the trigger, putting the safety back on. And that is gonna be how to take care of a semi-automatic firearm, or a rifle, I should say, that is probably going to be one of the more involved processes. The break action is going to be super simple. You just break it open. You can see all the way down the barrel. You know, you can see the feeding path and the chamber and the barrels. Pretty much, it's all in the same place. So you can see it just with your eyes. So that is a lot easier. Lever action is also quite easy because you have a tubular magazine. You cycle that action, make sure that nothing's coming out, and you follow exactly the same steps. Bolt action, as you'll see in a minute, is even simpler than that. It is super, super easy. So let's go ahead and move over to the bolt action. All right, so we've got a bolt action firearm here. Now, this is not one that you guys have seen before on the channel, and before you ask in the comments, yes, I'm going to be making a review on this very, very soon. And for those of you guys who are wondering, hey, are you going to be taking any of these guns that you review to the range? And the answer to that is yes as well. It's just that I don't drive, and for me, the range is very far. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to be making a compilation of range day videos for all the firearms that I review. So my reviews are all going to be tabletop, and then I'll have range days where I'm going to be taking these out, trying different ammo, trying, you know, for accuracy tests, to give you guys an idea of how they shoot as well, because obviously that's quite important. You know, a lot of us are not buying firearms just so we can put them on a wall or in the safe and leave them there, right? So I digress. This is the Bison. This is actually the Bison Ranger. This is chambered also in 5.56, and this is a bolt action. This is actually a Canadian-made firearm, so kind of nice. I recently just picked this one up, and let's just go ahead again through the prove the firearm is safe. So we're going to be pointing this in a safe direction. So just like that. Now, what's the next step? R, right? So remove cartridges. So we have a bolt, or rather a magazine release here again. There's no magazine. As you can see in the magazine well there, the magazine well is completely empty, but this would allow that magazine to drop free. The next thing that we want to do is we want to work the action, right? Because we want to make sure that there's nothing in that chamber. And in order to make sure that we've removed all cartridges, part of that isn't just removing the magazine. You guessed it, it's also making sure there's nothing in the chamber. So with a modern bolt action, all you're gonna do is you're gonna pull up on the bolt, just like that, and then you're gonna pull back. And that is gonna have exactly the same effect as pulling that charging handle back on a semi-automatic firearm. It's going to grab that the base of that cartridge, if there is one in there, using the extractor, and then as you pull that out, just like that, it's gonna pop that cartridge or that casing or whatever might be in there out. Now again, we don't want to completely rely on that, but that's part of the process. The next is, of course, going to be to observe the chamber, and this is going to be really easy because I can just see that chamber in there right now, and I can even see light coming through the bottom of the magazine well, which is good because the next step is going to be to verify the feeding path. So as you can see, there's nothing there, and there is absolutely nothing in that chamber as well. You can get a good idea of the space in there. There's absolutely nothing in there. And then the next is going to be examine the bore. And again, you know, you can use that light if you feel comfortable. If you want, you could put a bore snake through it. You could put a cleaning rod through it. And as long as you see that coming out the other side, then you know you're good. And that's it. You've proven the firearm safe. It's a lot easier on a bolt action because literally point, you know, remove, you hit your button here to drop your magazine. If you have a magazine-based, you know, bolt action, if you have a single shot, that's even easier. Just open up the action just like that, observe the chamber, verify that feeding path, and examine your bore. And that's it. We've now proven that that firearm is safe. And again, very, very similar to that of other types of rifles. Just remember, point, remove, you observe the chamber, and then verify the feeding path and examine the bore. That's it. Point, remove, observe, verify, examine, and you're finished. Now, I know that that seems like a lot to some people. Let me just put this down for a second. It seems like a lot to learn, but to be honest, it's nice that that acronym is there because that really helps you to ingrain that into your mind. And you'd be surprised how quickly you can do it. So if I close the action on my bolt action here, I might just maybe simulate coming back and picking up my firearm after not picking it up. Now, the only thing that's not realistic about this is I would never leave my firearm on a bench at a range with the action closed. You always leave them with the action open and facing up. That's just the proper range etiquette and rules. But I'm just going to assume that I've forgotten to do that, or that I've gone over to another bench where my buddy left his bolt action rifle and he's accidentally left the action closed. And that immediately is a red flag for me. I go over, hey man, can I shoot your bolt action? Yeah, no problem. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, ooh, that action is closed. So even if that action is open, I still need to prove the firearm. But especially if it's closed, that is a huge red flag. That's like, I'm about to handle a firearm and pick it up, and maybe it's a firearm I'm not too familiar with, and I want to be extra careful and make sure that I clear that firearm so that I know what the status of that firearm is. And this is what the whole purpose of this is to get you into that sort of methodology of that repetition, that, you know, muscle memory, so that I see a firearm, I pick it up, I prove that it's safe. So very simple. Again, point, remove, observe, verify, and examine. And usually you can do this, I mean, within seconds for everything except for the examine part. And then for the examine part, again, if you want to be thorough, you can put a cleaning rod down there. You can carry, you know, a collapsible one or something with you, and just stick it down and make sure that you see it coming out the other side. And that is the only way to know for sure that there is nothing in that bore. So I know a lot of that was a little bit over-explained, but I just want to drive home the importance of making sure that you are proving your firearm safe when you pick them up. I know it sounds very nerdy and by the book kind of thing, but I mean, the reason why this was designed was just to enshrine that in your mind, that when you pick up a firearm, the number one priority is you need to keep yourself safe, you need to keep those around you safe, and you need to make sure that you keep your firearm safe as well, from, you know, free from damage or any potential situation that might cause it to malfunction or cause damage to itself or the nearby area. So that being said, let me know what you think down in the comments below. There will be more videos to come talking about the process of getting your license, including the Canadian Firearm Safety Course, the Canadian Restricted Firearm Safety Course, and then the act of actually applying. And if you're interested, we might even go through the whole application process so you get an idea of what is on the application before you even consider whether it's something that you want to do. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope that this has been helpful for you in some way, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.